that started for many banks and an opportunity for them to expand their reach. But many Nigerians are crying out over various issues which they say is making them lose trust in the banking sector and closing their accounts.
All right. Now, if this trend continues, the survival of many banks will be threatened. And economists are also warning that bad debts and low savings could also negatively impact the growth of many commercial banks in the country. Now, some of their reasons for abandoning their accounts include rip-off charges within the banking system, poor support for startup businesses, and miserly interest rates on savings. Some farmers in the country have also complained of lack of access to loans and credit.
Yes, indeed. And despite Central Bank of Nigeria's efforts to promote financial inclusion, Nigerian banks lost over 2 million customers between 2016 and 2017. Now, the total number of bank customers dropped from 61 million in 2016 to 59 million in 2017. According to statistics from the Nigeria Interbank Settlement Systems, that's NIBSS, the number of active bank accounts also reduced by 1.5 million, dropping from 65 million to 63.5. Now, the world says, as the World Bank says, Nigeria and 6 other countries are home to nearly half of the 1.7 billion people who do not have bank accounts. Bangladesh, China, India, Indonesia, Mexico, Nigeria, and Pakistan, the report read.
All right. Now, in 2018, barely 2 years to the 2020 target to reduce unbanked Nigerians to 20%. The Central Bank of Nigeria says the country's unbanked population currently stands at 37%. But some of the commercial banks blame the reduction on the introduction of the BVN. Is that really the case? One would ask if that is the case, because BVN, a lot of people have come to say that it helps to monitor the system and also for accountability's sake.
Yes.
Joining us for this discussion is a former banker and a public affairs analyst, also a financial analyst as well, an expert, Vivian Ani. Vivian, good morning and Happy New Year. It's good to see you in the new year. Interesting.
Yeah.
And we also have the CEO of Bama Farms, Wale Oyekoya. Good morning.
Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
It's been a while.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
You traveled to the United States?
Well, I've been in the farm.
Oh, interesting.
All right, Vivian, we had you before the Christmas, holiday and all of that, and you didn't go to the village? There was no need to, or was it part of
no, she said she wasn't going to the village.
Something happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
Work related. So
okay.
I had to rejig my whole.
More work, more money.
Just like us.
I'm not
more
sure.
work, more money.
I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
And the prince, you didn't have to go to, is it Ijebu?
I just came back from my farm this morning.
Oh.
I got the information to be here, especially to talk about the food security.
Yeah, exactly.
I said, where is it's a comfort.
Exactly. Okay.
Okay, now there seems to be a problem on our hands, Vivian Ani. The issue of unbanked Nigeria. More and more Nigerians are, being discouraged from using the services of the banks. Is it something to really worry about?
Oh,
2 million, Nigerians have dropped out of the banking system.
Yes, very true. They've dropped out of the banking system, but then again, don't forget that this drop of 2 million coincided with the enforcement of the BVN. BVN, I think, started about 2014, but then it really, picked at a certain point in time, and the government gave a directive that no BVN, no operation of accounts. As that December 2017, the total number of bank customers that had BVNs, operational, was about 31 million bank customers linked to 43 million bank accounts. That means taking into cognizance duplicated accounts. So the 2 million drop has to be seen from many angles. Yes, customers are very angry, including myself, because yes, I'm a customer, don't forget. Yes, as an ex-banker, yes. It got to a ridiculous point where a bank is telling me happy birthday and sending me a text message, and then at the end of the month I see text message charges, and I'm like, hey, hello, did I ask you to send me a happy birthday? So yes, a lot of ordinary Nigerians, including myself, were very, very upset with the banks. But then look at the drop from, like I said, many angles. If you've had the benefits of operating a bank account. It's unlikely that you completely shut down on the banking system because you're angry. What you usually do is that you move from the bank if you complain and you don't think you're getting answers and you think that they're perpetually shortchanging you in terms of excessive charges or generally making you unhappy, you move to another bank. But actual closure of accounts and exiting the banking system, I don't think that's what's happening.
Okay.
What's happening is more of an effect of the BVN.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, we hear that a lot of people open the banks, but they don't put monies in. The banks are not, the accounts are not active. They're just there. Now, Wale, let's come to you on the issue of people not being, like she said, are not being happy or not happy with the banks, especially from the farming population and the issue of provision of credit and loans. Talk to us. Are the banks providing this? Government has said that some of the banks certainly should be doing that.
Well, definitely, it's a different story entirely because the banking system, especially commercial banks, have not really been helping farmers in this country for a long while. And being a banker, she will testify to what I'm saying, that where there are so many intervention funds that were given to the banks, but they are not being dispersed to the real farmers apart from the political farmers. You know, we'll be talking about political farmers, portfolio farmers. Only God knows for how long we'll be talking about this, because for me, as an agribusiness person, going to a bank and you want to give me a loan of 28%, it doesn't really work out when the profit margin of a farmer is plus minus 10%. So it's more or less that all my profit is going to the bank. And we keep on talking why people default on the loans. If you look at the conditions they are giving to you, definitely they already leave rooms for default, especially when the infrastructure is not there. Maybe when they give you a loan, they didn't factor out that you are going to be using generators to power your own industry for more than 60% of your production.
Yes.
And look at the government double taxation that comes with it, and look at the ease of doing business in Nigeria. It's so many things were not put into factors when they give you this loan. It's when you have to be able to start paying that you have to find out, wait a minute, all these things were not put into pictures, and it makes people to be unable to pay back this loan. Maybe when you are coming from your farm, the road is not good. Maybe you are trying to transport your farm produce, everything perish on the road. Yeah. Or the NEPA people are there to frustrate you. The government, the state, local government are there to frustrate you. So when you add up all these things, people default on the loan. Then I have to disagree that people abandon the banks. Not that they abandon it. People are trying to streamline what they have or to consolidate. If you look at most Nigerians, they have 3, 4, 5 bank accounts. Yes. Doing what with it? Some of this, maybe more than half of these accounts are dormant. They don't even have money into why they have to serve it.
Is it a reflection of the lack of confidence in the banking system? I mean, at the tail end of 2018, you had a situation where some banks were subsumed by others.
Just like what you said, look at the charges they are giving to individuals, that is just send you a test that you didn't request for, they charge you. So many charges. So all these things make people think, try to consolidate what they have to streamline down. Why they have to be feeding the bank when the bank is supposed to feed me? Then it's only in Nigeria that I see that most banks are striving when the economy is not good. How are they getting the money? This is where the BVN comes in, and this is why I'm giving government the kudos to really checkmate the bank. Because if you look at most of the money in the banks, they are all abandoned money from the MDAs that are supposed to be able to run the country. They just deposit in the bank. So with the BVN, they are able to identify that some of this money are not meant to be.
Vivian, you want to help us understand, what exactly has been going on, especially as it affects, a farmer like Prince Oyekoya.
Okay, he's totally and completely on point. And if you look at the data, as at the end of, as at 2017, end of 2017, total credit extended by all banks to the core private sector was about 15.7 trillion. And out of 15.7 trillion, 3.4% went to agriculture. 3.4%. 3.4%.
Less than 5%.
So less than 5%. Now, it's worrisome, especially at the time when we're talking about diversification of the Nigerian economy. And we do know that, especially for sectors like farming, capital is a very, very integral part of their needs. However, because, sorry, but I'm wearing two caps here. Yeah. Even though now I'm in the consulting space, but the truth of it is I'm an ex-banker. So I understand the challenges, why the banks don't not that they don't lend to certain sectors, but they're sort of shy of lending to certain sectors. Now, look at the type of agriculture we're practicing in Nigeria. I was talking to the Prince just before we got on the program, and somebody was telling him that, oh, you don't look like a farmer. And I said to him, well, take it like this. To be honest.
How is a farmer supposed to look?
Precisely.
Precisely.
But I said to him, I said one thing to him. I said, look, I am used to people like you telling me they're farmers for the simple reason that we've done a lot of consulting in that space within the last couple of years, and increasingly I'm meeting people that look like him. But the truth of it is that
look like political farmers.
but the truth of it is that farming in Nigeria is not something we associate as big business. In America, farming is big business. But in Nigeria, we remember the typical farmers we know in the village, our grandfathers and co, precise subsistence kind of farming. It is very difficult to lend to a highly unstructured business and not expect a high level of default. Now, in addition to the fact that farming traditionally in Nigeria, or agriculture, let me use the word agriculture, traditionally is unstructured and is on that little level. But then there's another thing, farming itself comes with a lot of production risks. Now, there's not enough time to go into the issues, at length here. But think of climate change and its effects. Think of the fact that the way we farm in Nigeria, and I'm using this word, these words deliberately, the way we farm here, it makes farming very, very vulnerable to the elements. Other countries have gone beyond that point. Right now, we're talking about vertical farming in some countries where they've been able to get farming out of the mercy of climate issues and elements. But in Nigeria, we're still at that level. So when the banks look at farmers, we see everybody must eat. That's what the average person will see. But what the banker sees is plenty risk and plenty possibility of default for the issues I just talked about.
But that brings us to the issue of someone who has a business plan. Because the point there is every farmer in Nigeria would not certainly be the subsistent farmer.
Precisely.
Now, there are some farmers who have a business plan of a strategy of how they want to go into a certain line of farming, whether it's poultry or whether it's either livestock or crop farming, as the case may be, with a lot of potentials and all of that. How about the banks standing by them from the beginning to the end?
I agree.
Because when it comes to irrigation, when it comes to pesticides and all of those things, they are all part of the things that, if they are present, can minimize the risks that the farmer should be.
Mike, I agree entirely with you. But a lot of times when we talk about lending to certain sectors that are emerging sectors, when I say emerging now, we just talked about how farming for a long time has not been like this. It's just recently we're getting very educated people who are trying to put structure into farming. But think of the fact that as you build capacity on the demand side, you must also build capacity on the finance supply side. The truth of it is that I'm not saying all banks, because I cannot say this about all banks, but a lot of banks don't have the capacity to understand farming, to understand modern day farming. So the banks too is a learning curve for the banks. They're trying to build up this capacity to understand the structured kind of farming that takes place in the United States. And it's not easy. So what you're seeing now is that this 3.5% that you're seeing that, portion of total credit to the core private sector to agriculture is part of the learning curve and the build up, I hope, because over time the banks will acquire capacity just as the demand side has acquired capacity to do.
All right.
Now, we all mentioned the issue of BVN earlier on. Has the BVN done more good in this regard? Because if people are saying, okay, because of the BVN, we are not able to operate accounts and all of that, is that supposed to be good news or is it supposed to be the otherwise?
To me, BVN is a good news in the sense that if you look at most of the money that the politicians have really stashed up, most of them find it difficult to access it. You can see what just happened recently where the government have to force some billions of naira that were just abandoned in the bank. Nobody show up for the claim. And these are the kind of things that the BN have really exposed how much politicians have really stashed the money and to really expose the corruptions in this country. But my sister was saying something about why banks are not really lending to the farmers. I believe any sane country, anywhere we are trying to talk about, the government always subsidize for the farmers, no matter what. That is why you see we don't really have most post-harvest loss in some of these other countries. Before your produce are ready to go into the market, The government already mop it up. They already pay for it. That way the farmers can go back.
We used to have clearing houses.
We don't have it anymore.
And that, because to be fair to her, when she was saying that we don't have a structured system, at that time, the clearing houses, there was a structure. But right now, there is no structure.
We have the structure. It's only we have not been able to implement the structures.
Okay.
We have beautiful.
So it's as good as not having a structure.
It's as good as we're not having. I was just discussing with her before we come to the studio that what happened to the research and development? It's dead. Every single country, there's a certain amount you really set aside for research and development. We keep on depending on what comes from other countries. If you look at most of the most of the input we put on our own ground today, they are from other countries.
How would this affect food security? Let me just go briefly into that.
Definitely it's going to affect the food security because these countries that were buying their produce already done their research based on their tropical and climate. Our climate is totally different from other countries like India or China that we are trying to copy. So we are supposed to get what would be suitable for our own land. That way we not plant, and when you are supposed to harvest, you are having a stunted growth. And if you look at the yield that we are having both from the crops and animals, is totally below expectations. So this is where the research and development comes in. The same thing with most of these modern tools that we are talking about. That's why you have most of this technology and most of the vocational schools, most of this like the FIRO. I'm of the opinion that the FIRO should champion most of this equipment that farmers are supposed to be using, like the tiller, planter, or harvester.
But FIRO has been
right?
FIRO is the one in Oshodi.
Yes, the Federal
Institute of Industrial Research. But the point there is, they've been coming up with a lot of inventions.
Are they really in circulations? Yes, they might decide that this thing is good for this thing. What about the cost effective? Are farmers able to afford it? And do you really even find it in circulation? Just like we are talking about rice. They say we have sufficiency in rice. But you go to the market, you can't find some of this.
So we blame government. We blame government in that regard.
Rice reduced to about 90%, according to the federal government. But let me bring it to BVNDL. I mean, he's raised some issues, but we cannot even talk about this without touching on the central bank's anchor borrower scheme, which, of course, he should be a direct beneficiary. But of course, that I would like you to respond to that too. Does government really? Let's even talk about the CBN itself. Do they really have an accurate data of who the genuine farmers are? Because we've heard from farmers like Prince Oyekoya that the anchor borrower scheme, really, a very brilliant idea, but it doesn't seem to get to the people that it should, get to. What exactly do you think is the missing link here?
Two things. Data compilation in a country like Nigeria has always been problematic, because what you find out is that government itself has to rely on, it's like a feed system. You have states, you have local governments, and then it feeds into the data bank, and then they do all sorts of things just to come up with a list that they believe is the target market. A lot of funny names end up on those lists. Yes, a lot of funny, when I say funny names that have no business being on that list do end up on those lists, and that's the truth. Now, that's the first part of it. Now, don't forget that projects like the Anchor Borrowers Farmers, the scheme, although it is initiated by the central bank and the funds are domiciled by the central bank, but the actual disbursement of the funds, the processing of the loans and the actual disbursement is routed through participating banks. Now, this is where the wahala starts. Now, it's one thing for the CBN to have good intentions, but then you're going to route it through somebody. And to even compound issues, you're telling the bank that you're routing it through that you are taking the credit risk. Most of the time. Yes, at times you're taking 80% of the credit risk, you're taking 70%, but the bottom line is you're taking the greater part of the credit risk, meaning if I give you money and you give to a farmer and something goes wrong, you're carrying the brunt of the risk. So the bank now says to itself, look, if I'm carrying the brunt of the risk, meaning that I better be careful who I give this money to and put all sorts of, and we've already talked about the unstructured nature of many farmers in Nigeria. Why you have some like him that are structured, but it's still a relatively more recent development. So the participating bank looks at it and says, okay, I have this 500 million to disburse to farmers. However, if anything goes wrong, I'm going to get debited by central bank and no questions asked. So they now start to look at the farmers well that they're giving this money to. And of course, you do know that the real people that need the money a lot of times will not get it, because it's either they can't meet the requirements or the bank does not feel comfortable with that level of exposure to them, and all sorts of issues. So a lot of times this intervention programs seem not to work or partially work. They don't ever reach their full potential because of that link. And you use the right word, the missing link. Once you're going through participating banks and you're telling banks that you're taking brunt of the risk as well. Now you could ask, why is central banks telling them that?
Yes.
Again, goes back to experience. There was a particular program, I've forgotten what the name of that intervention fund was, that the central bank came out with and said to the banks, just go ahead, lend, we will bear the risk. Let's not go there.
All right, so much to talk about there, but we have to leave it here now. Vivian Ani, former banker and financial expert, thank you so much for coming on the program. And Prince Wale Oyekoya, CEO Obama Farms, thank you very much for coming as well.
Who does not cut the image of the regular farmer that we know?
But
Thank you so much for
the interesting thing there is that we have most of our former presidents are all farmers.
Definitely. Even in US, not only in Nigeria.
Exactly.